Hello US, welcome to ManaTv live sessions on cluster subjects. Myself G. Ravi Teja, working as lecturer in computer science, S.A.B.R. Government Degree College, Repalle. So in this session, I am going to discuss some introductory parts regarding JSON. So JSON means JavaScript Object Notation. So in this session, I am going to cover the basics of JSON and how to code the basics of JSON and the grammar, and later how to access the JSON content in our applications, that is the working of JSON. So before going to start basics of JSON, let us have a pre-talk about this. So every day we use internet in our lives. So World Wide Web has become a part of our everyday lives. So we use this internet to access our online shoppings, online websites and e-content and educations, banking, everywhere we are using this internet. Actually, what we use is not internet, what we use is World Wide Web. So basically there is a difference between internet and www. Internet is a network of networks which connects all over the world systems in an infrastructural manner, whereas this World Wide Web is an application which runs over this internet. That means what we see, what we use and what we need in the internet is this particular World Wide Web. So using this World Wide Web, we access the content in terms of web pages. So to access this content, let us see the key layers of this internet. So we need these particular components. Basically we need computers, and that computer must be connected to network, and internet connection must be required to access the World Wide Web, and we access this World Wide Web using browsers. So we use a lot of browsers and many search engines to access this web. So what we access is really the content. The content is required whenever we use the internet. So in order to develop this content in the World Wide Web, we have several options. One of them is HTML, Hypertext Markup Language. So it is very good for presentation, means even a small piece of code can be used to develop a simple website. That means the basic knowledge of this HTML can be required and can be used to develop a websites. So for presentation purpose, this HTML is very good, and when come to the data part, it is very poor, because it focuses only on the presentation. To design aesthetically, to give more beautification, we can use this particular one. For whenever the part of this content is come, this HTML may not play a major role. So for data interchange, what is the alternative is XML. So very good option, extensible markup language can be used as an alternate data interchange. So why? Because this XML is simple and can be easily learned, and it is language independent, and as well as you create your own tags. Especially this XML made a very good major role in industries and organizations. So even though XML has the number of features, it has some drawbacks also. So it is document oriented, means who designs these particular XML pages, that is particularly defined for a particular application only, and this syntax is verbose. When compared to HTML, in XML you have tags, your own defined tags, okay, but it is not that much flexible as HTML. You have to open a tag, that means you have to close the tag, and it is a case sensitive, and you have to use the document type definition to validate it, and if there is any mistake in the code, you cannot get the output. And also it is very concrete, it is very tight, and it is less human readable, because whatever data you represent in XML, that can be only understandable by the programmers who have written it. That means it cannot be normally understandable by the common people. So this XML has also got some drawbacks in data representation. So what's the alternative? So here our best alternative for XML, JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. Actually this JSON is not a new part, actually this was reinvented by the Douglas Crockford from the JavaScript. What he did was he wanted to get some particular data formatting interchange application that can be used for in a language independent and common manner. So this JSON plays a major role in data formatting and exchanging. And when you come to this JSON, what its beauty is, it is more human readable than the XML. So we see in an example in the later slides. So, whatever JSON has some advantage over XML it is purely data oriented. That means you have to write the data whatever it required, and it is very simple to read and write, and it is very human readable. That means everybody can understand what you are going to place there in that JSON file. And as well as common with XML, it is simple and open source. So, everybody can freely use it and freely access it, and it is also language independent. That means it is not defined to any particular language, that is independent of language. So, here this JSON basically built on these two structures, very important two structures. First one is object. This object is inspired from the JavaScript object. Actually, it contains a name, value, key pair. So, actually in like a dictionary we use it in our data structures where we have a key value pairs. Here also we have name and value which are separated by the colon. So, that plays a major role in defining the data. And the second one, array. Actually, this array is available only on JSON, it is not available on XML. So, this is one more advantage of using JSON than the XML. So, let us see. So, this is a simple XML file you are seeing. Actually, here in this particular example, we are representing some textbook data. So, here we can verify. In textbook tag we have written two textbooks information, one is representing for web technologies and another one is for data structures. We have defined several fields to represent that particular data. Whereas, if you define this file in XML, they must be known that a particular textbook tag is there to represent the books, and every book must be represented in a book tag, and every book must have these many number of fields in order to define that particular textbook. So, you can see that this format is somewhat critical to understand for normal users, whereas if we represent the same XML file in JSON, it will be like this. So, here you can simply verify these particular textbooks. This is actually the XML tags name we have given, and these are all the data fields we are presenting there. As I discussed earlier, this particular object representation is key value pairs. So, every key it must be separated its value by colon. So, we observe here those two textbooks data is represented in a simpler manner. This simpler manner means we can use the fields and their values separated with colons, and we can define each object's representation separated by the entities by the commas. So, this is very much simpler when compared to your XML, because XML has some typical representation and it needs some validation before going to access the data. Whereas, this JSON you can simply represent whatever you want to write and whatever you want to send in terms of data on the internet. So, this particular JSON is very useful when compared to XML. Welcome back. So, in the earlier section we have seen what are the basics of JSON and how it is better than XML. So, in this section let us see some core components how we can write the JSON data in our programs. So, let us see this grammar. So, basically the syntax of JSON is very simple. We have to represent the data in key value pairs, and you can see here every key must be separated with value this colon symbol, and if we have multiple key value pairs or name value pairs, those must be separated with comma, and we use objects notation by using this curly braces, left curly brace and right curly brace, and we use arrays to represent in these square brackets. So, this is very simple syntax when compared to your XML, and these are the basic data types we use in our JSON. Even though we do not declare any variables or any type of operations here, we use these data types to represent the data for our file. So, basically string, it is very essential. whatever we write, whatever we give as the key and the value, we must be represented in string format. So, here this is color is a string and purple is a string. So, separate with colon, and the second data type we have is a number. So, roll number, that is 1101, and third one is boolean. So, boolean is all you know, it contains only true or false values. So, we can give either true or false for a particular key value. And later we have null. So, if you have something that do not have at this particular time and you are going to give that value later times, then you can declare the value as null. Null means nothing. So, at particular moment you do not have any value, but afterwards you can give or assign the value for that particular key. And later two most important data types we use are object and array. So, here we can see in object we represent the key value pairs, key followed by colon and followed by value. So, we separate these key value pairs using comma, right, and we use this curly braces representation to represent object. And whereas this array, to represent array we can use this particular square brackets notation. That means, whenever we need to assign multiple values or multiple entities for a single key value, then we can use this array. So, this array representation is very much useful whenever you want to represent multiple values, multiple set of values. Actually, this representation is not available in XML. So, XML you have to write everything in your predefined tags, but you do not have these multiple types of representation. And we elaborate on these particular things, objects and arrays. So, first one JSON objects. So, this is very much like our JavaScript objects. That means, we have to represent the data in this object notation. We write in key value pairs, that means the key followed by value, and this must be compulsory that keys must be strings. That means, you have to give the name before the value, that is very essential, then only the system can understand. And later we give the values in any one of the JSON data types. That means, we can give the value as a string or a number or a boolean or null, or we can give an object as a value, or we can give an array as a value. So, we can take whatever value required for this particular JSON key, and later these keys and values must be separated with colon, that is compulsory. And if we have multiple key and value pairs, those must be separated with commas. So, right. So, let us see. So, this is a standard notation we are taking from the json.org website. So, here we can verify string must be there before as a left hand and colon followed by value. So, we have to represent this string and value in curly braces, that is very essential. And these string values, if we have multiple string values, then we have to separate it with commas. So, then only we can represent multiple key value pairs, and this is a simple example as we have seen earlier. So, we representing the textbook data. So, this is the title, this is the name followed by colon and web technologies. So, this is the key or name which represents followed by the value, and we have to separate it with comma. Next, author, title and publisher person, and the cost you have seen here that 640 is a number. So, all these values are strings, and whereas this 640 is a number, we are representing entire thing in these curly braces. So, this is a simple notation of a JSON object, and later we discuss about arrays. So, array, as we all know, it is a collection of values, and this must be an ordered list of values, and we use these arrays to store multiple values in our JSON, because in XML we do not have that facility to store multiple values as a single entity. In this JSON, by using this array we can store multiple values, and whenever we store multiple values for a single key name, we must be separated with commas. We see in the example, and this arrays representation is very much similar in our JavaScript, because we use the square brackets notation to declare the arrays and we use the indexing format of 0, 1, 2 to access the arrays, and also we can store whatever data we required in this particular JSON array. This is a simple notation taken from the json.org site. Here you can verify whatever values we present in this particular JSON array, we separate them with commas. and this must be represented in square brackets. So, what if suppose author has 3 values, in this example you can verify, if author has 3 values then we can represent the authors in the square brackets, their names followed by commas. So, in this way we can use array as a part of our data. So, this JSON basically uses this objects and arrays notation to simplify the data interchanging, and this is very helpful whenever we are using in our web applications to access the data, to transfer the data from client to server or server to client. This is very useful. Welcome back. So, in earlier sections we have seen what are the basics of JSON and how to create JSON objects and arrays. Let's experience these JSON working. So, in this accessing the JSON, basically we need some predefined functions. First of them is Stringify. So, this is very essential in using this Stringify function in our program. What this Stringify function do? This Stringify function converts our JavaScript values into a valid JSON format. That means, here you can verify, if we are giving directly the name and value only like this format, so this is actually it is not a JSON format, we are simply giving as a JavaScript notation. So, what this Stringify function do is it takes the values and this key value pairs into this Stringify function as parameter, it converts them into JSON objects. Because when if you want to mention it as a JSON object, it must contain the key value pairs and key must be represented in a string format. Whereas, in this you can see that particular name, it is not mentioned in double quotes, and age, city, these are not mentioned in double quotes. So, this is not a valid JSON format. So, in order to make it as a valid JSON format, you have to represent in double quotes, and that must be done by Stringify function. So, if you want to represent the data in a JavaScript value and you want to convert into JSON format, you need to use this Stringify function. And later one is parse. Parse method is very essential in order to use the JSON represented string into our JavaScript program. So, in order to use this JSON string, we use this parse method. So, here you can see we are parsing the particular text as a parameter. What this parse method do? If we represent any key value pairs in JSON object and values, so this parse method takes them and it converted into normal JSON into JavaScript accessible formats. So, here you can verify we are parsing the particular string. Here you can see we are representing it in a JSON name representation. That means, we are giving it as in a double quotes. So, whatever we take for the parse method, that must be represented in a JSON valid object notation. If we parse any invalid JSON objects, then we get an error and we do not get any output. So, here we can verify, we can also produce the parsing data in our browser, we see later. Here we are supplying the direct data to this parse method. That means, either we can use any variable or any file or any data can be as a parameter to the parse method. So, this parse method takes these values and converts them into JavaScript accessible values. So, let us verify some examples how we can use this JSON with JavaScript. So, this is very important to you. We represent the data as name value pairs or key value pairs, and we need to use the Stringify method, and we have to use the parse method if we want to access JSON into our programs using JavaScript. Let us see some example. So, here it is a sample code I have written here. So, I am going to display the output in this paragraph tag. You can observe this is simple HTML file, and here I am writing the script. It mainly contains two parts. So, first one is used to store the data, and second one is used to retrieve the data. So, what is meant by storing and retrieving? I will say. So, in storing the data, I will give simple JavaScript notation. That means I am giving name as John, age as 31 and city as New York. So, this is a normal JavaScript notation, and after taking these values, I have to convert them into valid JSON format. So, after taking them, I will convert them into JSON objects using Stringify method. So, this method takes the data from the my object and converts them into valid JSON objects. That means name, it must be represented in double quotes and followed by the John, and age double quotes followed by the value 31, city double quotes followed by New York, and these three entities are taken into this Stringify method and it converts them into object. Later, after converting into JSON objects, we store them in a temporary local storage. Why this required is, in order to parse the data, it must be present somewhere. So, what we are doing is just storing this particular observed data, what is name, age and city, storing them into a JSON object in a local storage, that means a temporary storage. Later, in this part, we are going to retrieve that particular data. So, how to retrieve the data? So, let us say where we are storing that JSON data, we have already stored there at a test JSON, we have to get that item and we have to parse it, because we want to access the JSON data into our program. So, if we want to access the JSON data into our program, that must be parsed, then only we can get the items as required by us. So, this particular JSON.parse method, it takes the JSON objects and it parses for our convenience. That means, we can access the data into our normal programs like this. So, we can represent the accessing part as whatever the objects we got here followed by dot followed by the key value. So, this is the name what we mentioned in our data. So, that means we are accessing city value. So, the city value we already stored in this object. So, if we access object.city, it must retrieve the data from the JSON object and it must have to show the value as New York. Let us verify. So, after executing this file, yes, it is the output you are getting. So, New York. So, what happens is we store the data as a JSON objects and we retrieve the data using the JSON parse method. So, these are the two entities we must do. That means, in order to store as a local storage facility or a temporary storage facility, we take the values into normal values and we convert it in Stringify function. And in order to retrieve the values, we use our parse method from the same local storage reference and we can refer the values using dot operator. So, here you can verify the values accessed are New York, means we are going to print what is the city we stored. We store the city as New York. So, this is how you can access a simple JSON data into our program using JavaScript. Let us take another example where we can access JSON file in our JavaScript. That means, we can store the data in a separate file on our data storage, that means in our hard disk. So, we have to store the data as with a .json extension, that is compulsory. So, it also access other type of files also, but storing .json file gives one more flexibility, I will see you later. And after storing the data in JSON file, we must have to use XML HTTP request object. So, this XML HTTP request object is very much essential interacting with the servers and retrieving the data. So, after that we must have this JSON.parse method to retrieve the data from the file. So, let us verify. Here I am storing textbook.json as a JSON file. Here you can verify JSON file, yes, tbook.json. This is compulsory if you want to store the data in a JSON representation, right. So, this is the data I am storing in tbook.json. Same old XML format I converted into the JSON data and I am storing here. So, here you can verify I am representing the two textbooks data in an array form, and in this array each element is a type of object. So, as we discussed earlier, arrays can be used to represent multiple values. Multiple values means that can be strings or booleans or numbers or other objects or arrays also. So, here I am using this array representation to store two objects. One object represents the textbook of internet and world wide representation. So, here you can see the others part, it contains multiple values, we represented them in another array. So, we use this others in array representation to store three values Paul, Harvey and Abby separated by comma. So, next publisher cost. So, this entire thing comes under first textbook, and later we store the data regarding data structures as the second textbook. Same fields were mentioned here for our convenience purpose. We store this entire thing in our JSON file. So, this is not the thing when you are going to open JSON file in browser. This is how it look like in a browser. Just like we have seen earlier in XML files opening, you can open an XML file in a browser. If you do not have any mistakes in your XML file and if everything is fine, then you can see this type of hierarchical representation in XML when opening in a browser. Same as if you do not have any mistakes in your JSON file, then when you open JSON file in a browser, it will be look like this. So, here you can verify this is a hierarchical representation. Actually, we have defined the textbook in a array representation. So, it is giving 0 this for entire textbook, first textbook, and 1 for second textbook. Why 0 1? Because we used array notation. So, as we know, arrays start with 0 and 1. So, this is the first textbook index at 0 and the second textbook at index 1. And when come to the inner part, so for the first textbook we mentioned title, okay, it is okay, internet and world wide web, and as for the others part we used another sub array internally. So, you can verify here. So, whatever we have written for this others part, Paul detail, Harvey detail and Abby detail, so these three comes under this others only. That is why our representation came into this hierarchical format as others. Under others we have 0, 1, 2. So, others of 0 comes as Paul detail, others of 1 as Harvey detail and others of 2 as Abby detail, right. And later publisher and cost we have given as a normal key value pairs, so comes as normal. And for the second textbook we have the title, author, publisher and cost, everything is stored in a normal key value pair manner. So, if we write everything fine, then the JSON file can be opened in a browser and you can verify like this. This is the beauty if you write your data and store it as a JSON extension, because we can verify whether the data is written correctly, whether it is written according to the syntax or any errors are there. You can verify if you written in .json extension file. So, right. So, for this example we have taken this data and stored in .json file it in the hard disk. Later we access that particular JSON file, right. So, what are the necessary things to access the JSON file into our program? So, let us see, the first one is the XML HTTP request. So, that is very essential, because we store the data on hard disk, that means it is somewhere else. So, in order to access the data from other place, we have to use this XML HTTP request. What its use is, it is very helpful when you are accessing the data from remote servers. That is why we use this representation XML HTTP object, we take a variable from this object and later here you can see we open our file tbook.json. So, what this open function do is, if this file is found in the location and if it is able to get it, then it returns true. If this file is not found in the hard disk, then it is unable to open, that means you cannot process the data. So, it verifies whether the mentioned file is present on the hard disk or not. So, after verifying this file is present on the hard disk, it opens it and it gets the data whatever it wants. If everything is okay, then this particular object will be changed into ready state. Ready state means this can now access the data from the file. To access the data from the file, so here you can verify if this ready state is okay, then we can parse it. So, here using again, because we store the data in JSON objects. So, whenever we store the data in JSON objects, we use this parse method to retrieve the data. So, if the file contains multiple values, then this function keep on accessing the data in different recurrent manner and it can parse the data recursively. After parsing this particular text, we can get whatever data we want. So, particularly here we are accessing, you can see here textbooks of 1 dot title. Textbooks of 1 means you are going to access the data of second textbook, because you can see here textbooks of 0 means first textbook, textbooks of 1 means second textbook. So, here what we are doing is accessing the data of second textbook by writing textbooks of 1. If we want to access the first book details, then we have to write as textbook of 0, that is compulsory in order to access this data. Why? Because we represent this entire thing in array notation for the textbooks, right. So, we are going to access this particular textbooks of 1 and especially we are going to get the title details. We can get anything we want from this after we get access to particular object. We already parsed the data and we already got the access to textbooks of 1, then you can access either title or author or publisher or cost, whatever you want you can access it, because everything is available to you with the help of XML HTTP request. So, we are going to get the title of second textbook. So, if everything is okay and if this parsing method is done perfectly, then we can get the title of the second textbook and we are going to place it here. We can know this notation by accessing the elemental ID, we can place or we can modify the content of it. So, we are going to place this second textbook title in this paragraph. So, if everything is working fine, right. So, we can get it. The second textbook name is data structures. So, we can verify here. Here you can verify textbooks of 1, its title is data structures. So, if you want to change to author, you can get mark LNVs or publisher or cost, whatever it is required you can place it there and you can get the simple value representation. So, by using this XML HTTP request, we can access JSON file in our JavaScript program, and this JavaScript can be used to parse normal JSON representation objects in a direct file or separated into another file as with .json extension. So, we can do anything, that means accessing a temporary local data or accessing a separate file data into our JavaScript application. You can do either way and you can get the data. And after accessing this particular JSON data into our JavaScript, let us take another example which is very essential to accessing the JSON with jQuery. So, all of you know jQuery is a simplified version of JavaScript. What is the difference it? So, jQuery is as similar as your JavaScript, but its beauty is it is independent of browsers and it is very fast. We can observe in our example also. So, jQuery can be used as an alternative for JavaScript in accessing and processing the web related services, and especially if you are dealing with the JSON like things, this jQuery will help you a lot. This jQuery minimizes the processing and it improves the performance and efficiency of our programming. Let us verify. In order to access this JSON with jQuery, we need to represent the data as name value page. That is a simple example we are taking. We are taking the data as name value page. So, here you can observe we are storing our data in this JSON array. So, this is simple jQuery. So, this first line, this scripting information will be inculcated into our program to get the required JavaScript object into our program, and later we are going to place this particular accessed data into this ID, that is 01 we are giving for this H2 element, and we are representing this entire thing in an array notation. See, you can give another type of representation also, but this is very simple. What we are doing is we are storing this entire thing array. So, separated with key value pairs, commas, everything is similar as our earlier notations. We have given entire data in this JSON array, and we are referring this particular element as our output display purpose. So, after taking this data and after accessing the element what we required, we can simply access like this. See, there is no pass method here, that is not required. You can simply access the data as usual, because this jQuery is a simplified version of JavaScript. If you want to use in JavaScript, there you need Stringify and pass, whereas in this jQuery there is no requirement of this particular pass. You can directly access the data format and data values like this. So, here you can verify this JSON array representation. We represented the entire as a single textbook. So, we are getting the first textbook values 0 0 0. This 0 means our first reference, because in arrays we use the index 0 1 2 format. So, 0 represents your first in data and 1 represents second data, 2 represents other data. So, we are taking as a 0 0 0, that means we have represented like this in a single array notation, and this is a single element. If we have multiple textbooks data, then we can separate them and we can write like this. So, just like this curly braces represents one object, we can write another object here and comma, we can write another object there. So, we can write as many number of objects as required for our program. So, for simplicity I am taking here as a single object, only one object. So, here you can verify I am going to access the title, author, publisher and cost details of the particular textbook. So, we can directly access by referencing the array index and the key name what required for our data purpose. So, we are accessing the 4 values: title, author, publisher and cost. We are getting the entire things into our program, and we are directing them into our element what we are accessing as H2 to display the output. So, here we do not have any output data, but after running this program we can get the output there. We are displaying the title, author, publisher and cost in that H2. So, if we run this data, then this is the output you get, right. So, entire 4 values are displayed here. So, data structures, mark LNVs, Pearson education and 350, these are the 4 values we represented in our program, and we got those 4 values as a reference of the function executed by this jQuery. So, this is very simple if we want to use JSON into our jQuery, right. So, in this particular context of working this JSON with JavaScript and jQuery, you can observe that JSON is very easy and when compared to the XML, and it is very simple to learn and simple to write and simple to store when compared to XML file. And you can verify whether the written JSON file is valid or not by simply opening it in a browser. If we get the hierarchical structure in a neat manner without any errors, that means the file written by you, it is correct and it gives you the correct data when it transferred to another remote sites. And if it is any error there, then you are not supposed to get the data in browser. And while accessing the JSON with JavaScript and jQuery, you need to remember 2 things. Whenever you want to access the JavaScript, you need to use either Stringify function and pass function, and for jQuery you do not require any parse function because it is already simplified. So, you can directly get the data without any hurdle. And to get more knowledge about this JSON, you can have some useful resources I mentioned here. You can take these textbooks beginning JSON written by Ben Smith and JSON Network by Thomas. Those are very useful for the beginners if you want to learn the programming skills in JSON and if you want to use your JSON data as a part of your web applications. These two textbooks are very useful. And later you can also use these two URL references. That means the first one can be used XML to JSON converter. So, what this website do is, if you have any XML file and you do not know how to convert that particular file into JSON, then you can upload your XML file into this particular website and that website automatically converts the XML file into JSON file, provided if your XML file does not have any errors. If your XML file have any errors, then the generated JSON file will not be valid for your application. So, it must be taken care that the file what you are uploading on this particular website, that is the XML file, must be a valid and correct XML file. Then only this website can generate the correct JSON file. And the later second site is json.org, where you can get the basic information regarding this JSON, that is JSON syntax, JSON objects, arrays and any other extra information. That means the advanced usage of JSON along with the server side programming. You can also get the data on this particular json.org website. So, I hope in this session you got some points related to the introductory part of JSON, that means the basics and how to write the JSON in applications and how to access the JSON using JavaScript and jQuery. I hope all of you got the minimal point required to understand this particular session. Thank you very much.